As our movie starts, we find out that 2 German couriers were murdered and the culprit fled to Casablanca, and the police were informed to capture anyone who was suspicious. And this is them now rounding up people that they think are suspicious and also shooting the ones that try to run away. As our scene shift, we're introduced to Major Heinrich Strasser. He's a Nazi, obviously, and he came to Casablanca to find out who murdered those 2 German couriers. Louis informs Strasser that they've rounded up the usual suspects and they've already figured out who this murderer is, and they know he will be at Rick's tonight. And if you're wondering who Rick is, he's an American that runs a saloon in Casablanca, and he's also pretty famous, and even Major Strasser knows who he is. So this is Rick's Americana. Everybody who's anybody comes here. It's the most popular spot if you want to gamble, do anything illegal, or just get any kind of information whatsoever. And this classically handsome fellow who's playing chess by himself is the famous Rick. Rick has a few rules when it comes to life. He doesn't pay for anyone, he doesn't drink with anyone, and most of all, he never sticks his neck out for anybody. So after Rick tells off this German rich guy that he can't gamble in his place, Ugati, a person who provides exit visas for people stuck in Casablanca, starts a conversation with Rick. He talks about those German couriers that got killed, and then he starts to talk about how he got tickets to Lisbon that cannot be rescinded. Now, these tickets are difficult to come by even if you do have money. Ugati here says that he's gonna sell it for more money than he ever dreamed of, and he could probably get maybe $100,000 or $200,000 out of it. And after Ugati talks about these transit tickets, he tells Rick, since he's the only one that hates him and doesn't really care about anything, he wants him to keep those letters for him for a couple of hours until he leaves. Rick confronts him about how those German couriers that died were carrying such a similar transit ticket, but Ugati admits to nothing and says that he doesn't know anything about them. Realizing these tickets could probably get him killed, Rick decides to hide them in Sam's piano. If you're wondering who Sam is, it's the black guy playing the piano. He's pretty good too. As the night progresses, we see Rick rejecting an offer from Ferrari, who wants Sam to play at his bar since he's so good, and then we see Rick throwing out Yvonne, a very attractive woman that he was involved with, but since he doesn't really care about anything, he just thought that she had enough to drink and he sends her on her way. A bit later into the night, Captain Louis and Rick have a conversation. Louis is a pretty fun guy. I mean, he's the most corrupt cop you'll ever meet, but he does great police work as long as it benefits him. And Louis tells Rick that he's gonna see some excitement at his saloon tonight as they will be capturing a murderer, and he tells Rick not to get involved. He also starts another interesting conversation about a man named Victor Laszlo. This guy Victor is pretty famous and he's a freedom fighter, and he actually escaped a concentration camp and has been traveling throughout Europe as the Nazis are chasing him, and now he's in Casablanca. Captain Louis informs Rick that they want Victor to stay in Casablanca, and he's afraid that Rick might help him obtain exit visas to go to Lisbon. Why Louis thinks that Rick, the most indifferent person you'll probably meet, will help him is because of Rick's history. You see, Rick likes helping the underdog, and he's done so on many occasions in Ethiopia and Spain. After informing Rick of the situation, a few moments later, Major Strasser makes it to Rick's, and Louis does as he said and he apprehends the murderer of those German couriers, and the murderer turns out to be Ugati. He tries to get away and even shoots at some of the officers, but to no avail as they catch him and take him to prison. Major Strasser is happy and pretty pleased to see that the murderer has been caught, and Rick finally gets to meet the Nazi. The Major tells Rick that he studied him and he knows a lot about him, and he feels as though Rick might be in a position, especially when it comes to Victor Laszlo. It's made clear to us here that Strasser, the Nazi, is technically in Casablanca because he wants to deal with Victor Laszlo. But Rick makes it clear that he doesn't care about Laszlo or anyone, cause Rick, as I said, never sticks his neck out for anybody. Then a few moments later, Victor Laszlo himself walks into Rick's, but he wasn't alone. He was technically with his wife, and she happens to be the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. So they sit, they try to relax, and this dude tries to approach them, and he turns out to be a member of the resistance that Laszlo is also part of. As I've said, that he's a freedom fighter and a political activist, and he wrote a lot of papers criticizing German occupation in Europe. But before his secret contact said anything valuable, Captain Louis and Major Strasser arrive on the scene and they welcome him to Casablanca. Major Strasser, being a Nazi, tries to force Victor into having a meeting, but Laszlo refuses, and Captain Louis interjects and sugarcoats the situation and tells him that he requests his presence tomorrow afternoon. Wait, hold on. Did you subscribe to our channel? Come on guys, you're here, you're watching the video, help us out by hitting the subscribe button as it really helps out me and my team to make more videos for you guys. And now, let's get back to the recap. As the very eventful night continues, Sam notices Victor's wife, and for some reason he's really shocked to see her. She then approaches him and asks about Rick, but Sam tells her that he's not here and that he hasn't seen him all night, which is of course a big fat lie. And as their conversation continues, Victor's wife, Ilsa, forces Sam to play this song that he didn't want to play. And as soon as Sam starts playing the song titled As Time Goes By, Rick immediately comes over asking Sam why he's playing that song that he told him never to play again. But just then, Rick locks eyes with Ilsa and he just freezes. And for the first time ever, after exchanging pleasantries, Rick sits down with a customer and has a drink. He even decides to pay the bill after Victor and his wife left, and apparently Ilsa knew Rick back in France. And how she knew Rick is revealed to us on the next scene as Rick tries to drink himself to death thinking about the memory. Apparently, these two were head over heels in love, and as they were living their lives in France, the Germans came on knocking, and Rick had to leave since the Germans were looking for him. And on the day that they were supposed to leave together, him, Ilsa, and Sam, she just left him stranded at the train station, and she left him a note that read, "Richard, I cannot go with you or even see you again. You must not ask why, just believe that I love you so, my darling, and God bless you, Ilsa." So this pretty much sums up the history between Ilsa and Richard, aka Rick. His nostalgia is interrupted by Ilsa herself, who comes to the bar looking to explain herself. But he was way too drunk for an explanation, and he says something bad to her and she storms off. The next morning, Victor and Ilsa head to the police station to talk to Captain Louis and Major Strasse. The Major proposes something to Victor. If he hands over the names of all the resistance leaders that he knows, he would give him and his wife a pass to go to Lisbon and then to the US. But Victor, like anybody with a brain, has too much integrity to deal with a Nazi, and he says no. He tries to obtain the tickets by other means, but Captain Louis and Major Strasse made sure that nobody in Casablanca sold Victor Laszlo any tickets whatsoever. When they go to Ferrari, who controls all the illegal activities in Casablanca, he tells them that he can't sell Victor tickets, but he can give them one ticket so that his wife can travel to Lisbon. Victor tells her to take it and urges her to go to Lisbon, but Ilsa was too in love and too loyal to ever abandon her husband. And so the couple reject Mr. Ferrari's offer, but before they left, he hints at the fact that Rick may have those transit papers that were taken from those German couriers. But when the time came and Victor Laszlo offered Rick $200,000 in order to get those tickets, Rick refuses and tells him to ask his wife why. Later that night, Victor tries to confront his wife in the most sweetest way possible, but she doesn't tell him anything and he does not push her any further. And as he steps out to go to a secret meeting, she steps out to go to Rick's to beg for those papers. She pleads with Rick and begs him and even threatens him with a gun, but Rick was a man's man and too macho to be afraid of a woman holding a gun, and so he tells her to go ahead and shoot. But it's revealed to us that Ilsa was still so crazy about Rick, and the two just end up making out, and she finally explains what actually happened with Laszlo and why she didn't show up that day at the train station. So when she was back in France, she never really told Rick anything about her personal life, but she was still married to Laszlo. The thing is though, he wasn't there because he was in a concentration camp and they told her that he died and she was feeling pretty lonely, and Rick had that look on his face and he didn't care about anything, and plus he looked pretty good in a suit, you gotta admit that, so she decided to stay with him. But on the last day, as she was about to leave with Rick, she gets word that her husband is actually alive and that he escaped the concentration camp. After explaining all of this to Rick, when he asks her what she feels now, she answers by saying that she can't bear to leave him again. She then tells Rick that now that he knows why she did what she did, he should give the papers to Laszlo so that he goes away to Lisbon because he's such an important figure and his cause has been his life. But before they finish their conversation, Victor, who was being chased by the police at night, goes into Rick's to hide. Rick tells one of his employees to take Ilsa home, and as he talks to Victor, Victor reveals that he knows about him and his wife, and he then goes on to propose something really interesting to Rick. He tells him since both of them are in love with Ilsa, her safety should always come first and be a priority, and so he tells Rick to use the transit papers for him and Ilsa and travel to Lisbon together. Rick was really intrigued by this, and technically so was I, but before Victor could speak any further, the police come and arrest him. And the next day, the very ruthless Rick goes to see Captain Louis. He tells him that he only got Victor on a lousy charge such as breaking curfew, and since he's gonna have to release him in a couple days, Rick offers to to consort with Captain Louis to set Victor up so they can hold them permanently. When Louis asks why Rick is so hell-bent on helping him, Rick responds by saying that by tomorrow, him and Ilsa will be going to America and he does not want Victor following them in a couple of days. Hearing this plan, Captain Louis agrees to let Victor go since he will go to Rick to get those papers, but since Rick and Louis are in cahoots, Louis will be there to catch Laszlo red-handed. But just the next day, as Victor goes to Rick to get the papers, Rick gives it to him and Captain Louis comes out to arrest Victor, but in a sudden twist, Rick double-crosses Captain Louis and tells him to call the airport and call off his dogs and to let Victor and his wife pass with those papers. But Captain Louis was a fox and he calls Major Strassa instead, then pretends as though he was talking to his own men, and this signals Strassa to go to the airport because he knows that something is wrong. After making the call, they all head to the airport, then Rick makes Louis sign the names of Ilsa and Victor on the paper. Ilsa is surprised by this and Rick reveals to her that she actually does belong to Victor. You see, Rick has realized a simple truth. He's realized that Ilsa loves Victor so much that she's willing to sacrifice her entire life and pretend to be in love with Rick and marry him just to save Victor from Casablanca. And before they left, Rick comes clean and tells Victor what Ilsa did, and he tells him the truth and that she did it for him because Ilsa truly does love Victor more than she loves Rick. As soon as their plane takes off, Strassa gets there and tries to make a phone call to stop it. Rick tells him to drop the phone, but Strassa, being the ignorant German Nazi that he is, doesn't, and Rick shoots and kills him. As soon as Rick killed him, Captain Louis' men arrive at the scene, but Louis tells them to round up the usual suspects, cause who gives a damn about a Nazi? And that is where one of the greatest movies ever made comes to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed this recap. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and most of all, subscribe to my channel. I love you guys so much and I hate Nazis. Bye.